The dining room was full of laughter, clinking glasses, and the warm smell of roasted lamb. It was Easter Sunday, and my parents had invited the entire extended family just like they did every year. My aunts, uncles, cousins, and even my grandmother were sitting around the long table covered in pastel decorations and baskets of chocolate eggs. I remember thinking how normal everything felt, how ordinary the moment seemed. My mom kept smiling politely while passing dishes around, and my dad joked with my cousins like he always did. I had no idea that within a few minutes, my entire life would be turned upside down. Halfway through dinner, my father suddenly stood up and tapped his glass with a fork. The small clink echoed across the table, slowly silencing everyone. Conversation stopped, forks paused in midair, and all eyes turned toward him. I smiled nervously, expecting one of his usual holiday speeches. But the look on his face was different, cold, almost rehearsed. He cleared his throat and glanced at my mother, who nodded slightly. Then he looked directly at me and said words that made my heart drop straight into my stomach. "Everyone deserves to know the truth," he began slowly. "She isn't actually our real daughter." For a moment, the room felt frozen in time. I thought I had misheard him. No one laughed. My aunt's eyes widened in shock. My cousin lowered his fork onto the plate, and my grandmother stared at my parents with confusion written all over her face. My chest tightened as I looked from one face to another. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. My mother sighed dramatically, like she had been waiting years to say this out loud. "We adopted her when she was a baby," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. "And to be honest, she has never really fit into our family." The words felt like knives sliding slowly into my chest. 25 years of birthdays, family vacations, and holiday dinners suddenly felt like a lie. My cousin leaned closer to me and whispered, "Is this some kind of joke?" But my parents continued speaking, as if I wasn't even sitting there. My father shrugged casually and said, "We did what we could, but blood is blood." A heavy silence spread across the table as people began exchanging uncomfortable looks. Some relatives stared at me with pity, others avoided my eyes completely. I could feel the humiliation burning through me while my hands trembled under the table. They had just destroyed my entire identity in front of everyone I had grown up with. For a moment, I thought about standing up and walking out of the house forever. But instead, I slowly reached into my purse, because inside it was something they didn't know about, an envelope that had arrived only 2 days earlier. And the moment I placed that envelope quietly on the table, the entire room was about to fall into a silence none of them would ever forget. My hands were shaking slightly as I placed the envelope in the center of the table. The sound of the paper touching the polished wood was soft, but in the heavy silence of the room, it felt incredibly loud. Everyone's eyes immediately moved from my parents to the envelope. My father frowned, clearly annoyed that I hadn't run out crying like he probably expected. My mother crossed her arms and gave me a look that said I should just accept the humiliation quietly. But I didn't move. I simply sat there, staring back at them. "What is that?" my father asked with an impatient tone. I took a slow breath, trying to steady the storm of emotions inside my chest. "Something interesting," I said calmly. My voice surprised even me. It was steady, almost cold. My mother rolled her eyes slightly. "This isn't the time for drama," she said sharply. "Everyone already knows the truth now." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly unsure if they should stay or pretend they hadn't heard any of this. But curiosity kept them glued to their chairs. I slowly pushed the envelope across the table toward my father. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "Open it." My father hesitated for a moment before grabbing the envelope. His expression showed mild irritation, like he thought this was some desperate attempt for attention. He slid a finger under the seal and pulled out several folded documents. As his eyes moved across the first page, his confident expression slowly began to fade. His eyebrows tightened, and the color started draining from his face. My mother noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" she asked impatiently, leaning closer. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept reading the pages, his hands gripping the paper tighter with every second. The room had become completely silent again, but this time it wasn't because of my father's announcement. It was because something was clearly very wrong. Finally, my mother snatched one of the pages from his hands. Her eyes scanned the document quickly, and within seconds her confident posture collapsed. This can't be right," she whispered. My aunt leaned forward from across the table. "What does it say?" she asked cautiously. I folded my hands together on the table and finally spoke. "It's a DNA report," I explained calmly. Several relatives gasped quietly. My cousin's eyes widened as he looked between my parents and me. My father suddenly slammed the papers back onto the table. "These tests can be wrong," he said quickly, his voice much louder than before. But his panic was obvious. I shook my head slowly. "Actually, they're not wrong," I replied, because I didn't take the test alone. My mother's face turned pale. "What do you mean?" she asked. I looked directly at her. "The test compared my DNA with both of yours." A long silence filled the room again. Everyone was waiting for the answer they could already feel coming. I leaned back slightly in my chair and finished the sentence they weren't prepared to hear. "According to the results," I said quietly, "I am biologically related to one of you." My father's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood up. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, but his voice trembled. My mother stared at the paper like it was something poisonous. Her hands were shaking now. My grandmother spoke for the first time since the announcement, her voice soft but firm. "Related? How?" she asked. I picked up the top page of the report and gently slid it toward the center of the table, so everyone could see the bold line printed near the bottom. "Because," I said slowly, "the DNA test confirms that he is my biological father." Every head at the table snapped toward my father. The color completely disappeared from his face as the room exploded into shocked whispers. My mother's chair pushed back suddenly as she stood up, staring at him with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "What did she just say?" she demanded. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. And in that moment, the Easter dinner they had planned to humiliate me turned into the beginning of a secret they had been hiding for 25 years. The room fell into complete chaos after the truth came out. My mother stared at my father like she had never seen him before, her face pale with shock and anger. Relatives began whispering to each other, some standing up from their chairs as the reality of the situation slowly sank in. The humiliation my parents had planned for me had suddenly turned against them. My father tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat while my mother demanded answers he clearly wasn't ready to give. I quietly stood up from my chair, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being judged at that table. As I picked up my purse, I looked at them both and said softly, "Next time you try to embarrass someone in front of everyone, make sure the truth is actually